In 1930, 13 teams boarded boats for a tournament nobody thought would matter. No television, no sponsors, barely any money. 96 years later, that same tournament will generate more revenue than the GDP of entire countries, distribute over $800 million to its players in a single summer, and crown a champion who walks away with a check for $50 million. This is the story of how a football tournament became one of the most powerful financial machines on earth, and how, along the way, it nearly tore itself apart. The World Cup almost didn't exist. Football had been dropped from the 1932 Olympics, and FIFA's president, Jules Rimet, decided the sport needed its own stage. He found exactly one country willing to host: Uruguay, a small nation celebrating its centennial, fresh off back-to-back Olympic gold medals. Getting teams to show up was its own battle. Europe was in the grip of the Great Depression. Most clubs couldn't afford to send players on a 3-week boat journey across the Atlantic. In the end, only 4 European nations made the trip, and Rimet reportedly had to personally convince his own country, France, to go. 13 teams arrived. No qualifying rounds, no global broadcast, just gate receipts from local fans. On July 13, 1930, Lucien Laurent of France scored the first goal in World Cup history. 17 days later, the host nation, Uruguay, beat Argentina 4-2 in front of nearly 70,000 fans to become the first world champions. It was a sporting event, not yet a business. That was about to change, slowly, then all at once. 1994. The United States, a country where football was a minor sport, hosted the World Cup anyway. It was a gamble. It paid off spectacularly. The tournament generated an estimated $1.3 billion for FIFA, with profits around $1.45 billion against costs of $5.6 billion. The final alone reportedly delivered more profit to Los Angeles than that year's Super Bowl. The blueprint for the modern, sponsor-driven World Cup had been written.
Watch the climb. 1998 France. FIFA revenue around $1.9 billion. The tournament expands to 32 teams. 2002, Korea and Japan, roughly $2.3 billion. The first World Cup held in Asia, the first co-hosted by 2 nations. 2006, Germany, $3.2 billion, a new broadcast rights record. 2010, South Africa, $3.6 to $3.7 billion, the first World Cup on African soil. 2014, Brazil. FIFA's reported cycle revenue climbs toward
1994. The United States, a country where football was a minor sport, hosted the World Cup anyway. It was a gamble. It paid off spectacularly. The tournament generated an estimated $1.3 billion for FIFA, with profits around $1.45 billion against costs of $5.6 billion. The final alone reportedly delivered more profit to Los Angeles than that year's Super Bowl. The blueprint for the modern, sponsor-driven World Cup had been written.
Watch the climb. 1998 France. FIFA revenue around $1.9 billion. The tournament expands to 32 teams. 2002, Korea and Japan, roughly $2.3 billion. The first World Cup held in Asia, the first co-hosted by 2 nations. 2006, Germany, $3.2 billion, a new broadcast rights record. 2010, South Africa, $3.6 to $3.7 billion, the first World Cup on African soil. 2014, Brazil. FIFA's reported cycle revenue climbs toward $4.8 to $5.7 billion, depending on the report, even as protesters fill the streets over stadium spending. 2018, Russia. roughly 6.1 to 6.4 billion, 10% above FIFA's own target.
Notice the pattern. Every 4 years, almost without fail, the number gets bigger. Broadcasting rights now make up nearly half of everything FIFA earns. Sponsorship makes up most of the rest. And FIFA, officially a non-profit, started quietly stockpiling the difference. By 2014, its financial reserves sat at $1.5 billion. By 2018, that had grown to $2.74 billion. The World Cup wasn't just growing, it was becoming one of the most efficient cash-generating events ever created. But behind the climbing numbers, something else was growing too. In May 2015, Swiss police walked into a 5-star hotel in Zurich and arrested senior FIFA officials, just days before the organization's annual Congress. The U.S. Department of Justice unsealed an indictment describing more than 2 decades of bribery, racketeering, and money laundering, over $150 million in illicit payments connected to broadcasting deals, sponsorships, and, most explosively, the votes that decided which countries would host the World Cup itself. Investigators alleged that the bidding processes for the 2010, 2018, and 2022 World Cups had all been compromised. One allegation? A $10 million payment connected to South Africa's successful 2010 bid. Another, bribes tied to the votes that sent the 2018 tournament to Russia and the 2022 tournament to Qatar. Within weeks, FIFA's president of 17 years, Sepp Blatter, announced he would step down. More than a dozen officials eventually pleaded guilty. The lesson was simple and brutal. When a tournament generates billions of dollars, the right to host it becomes just as valuable as the trophy itself. And the next host on the list was about to prove that point on a scale nobody had seen before. Qatar's bid was, on paper, almost absurd. A nation smaller than some U.S. states, with no football history, where summer temperatures make outdoor sport nearly impossible. The decision to award it the 2022 World Cup remains one of the most scrutinized in FIFA's history. But financially? It was a triumph FIFA hadn't even predicted.
FIFA's 4-year cycle, ending in 2022, generated a record $7.5 to $7.6 billion, with $5.77 billion of that arriving in 2022 alone, the year of the tournament itself. Television rights brought in $3.43 billion. FIFA's cash reserves jumped from $2.81 billion to $3.89 billion in a single year. Total prize money for the players reached $440 million, with champions Argentina taking home $42 million.
Qatar reportedly spent over $200 billion preparing to host, on stadiums, infrastructure, an entire transportation system. FIFA spent almost none of its own reserves on any of it. That's the core mechanic of the modern World Cup. FIFA collects the broadcasting money, the sponsorship money, and a growing share of the ticket money, while host nations absorb the infrastructure bill. It's a model that just keeps getting bigger, and in 2026, it's about to get bigger than ever before. For the first time in history, 3 countries, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, are co-hosting. The tournament has expanded from 32 teams to 48, and from 64 matches to over 100. More teams, more games, more broadcast windows, more sponsors.
FIFA's official projection for this 4-year cycle, $11 to $13 billion, nearly double the previous record. Some independent economists, accounting for surging ticket prices, project the total could exceed $15 billion. The tournament itself is projected to generate somewhere between $8.9 and nearly $11 billion on its own. Prize money for the players has been raised to a record $871 million, almost double Qatar's total. Every one of the 48 teams is guaranteed at least $12.5 million just for showing up. The champions will collect $50 million. FIFA's reserves are projected to cross $4 billion by the end of this cycle.
From 13 teams traveling by boat with no broadcast and no sponsors, to a tournament expected to generate more money in one summer than most national economies produce in a year. The World Cup didn't just grow, it evolved into something almost unrecognizable from where it started. A global financial event that happens to have a football tournament inside it. Every 4 years, the world stops to watch. But now you know what's really on the scoreboard. If this kind of story interests you, subscribe, because the real game is always the one behind the game.